we're exploring Brookwood Farm today, and as you can see, there's a lot of work going on. But today we're going to be talking about meadow habitat. In New England, our open space naturally grows into forests, but there's another type of habitat that depends on us to maintain it, or we lose it and the species that depend on it. Hi Rick, I'm Judy Lara-Jacobs, Executive Director of the Friends of the Blue Hills.
And I'm still Rick Kessli, and I'm from University of Massachusetts, Boston, and I live in Milton. And I guess we're going to talk about this habitat here today. Is that correct, Judy?
We are. Thanks, Rick. So you are watching Blue Hills Alive, your weekly guide to the Blue Hills. And if you have been to Brookwood Farm, we'd love to know in the comments. Just a yes or no would be great. This video series is sponsored by Tom O'Neill of Success Real Estate in Milton, and we are exploring Brookwood today, and you'll probably see some of the property from a different perspective. If you want to see some other parts of the Blue Hills and learn about maybe some parts that you don't know about, you can download a free guide to the Blue Hills at friendsofthebluehills.org/guide, and this is a great season to check out the guide because it'll tell you where you can find mountain laurel that will be in bloom. If it's not now, it will be soon. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about where we are?
Okay, Judy.
Thanks, John.
We are on Brookwood Farm. I thought I'd maybe give you 1 minute of history of Brookwood Farm. It's been maintained as a meadow area for at least 50, 60 years, and maybe before that. I think the last owner was Henry Saltonstall Howe, and he deeded this to the DCR, or actually MDC at the time, something like 1976. It was a gentleman's farm. It was maintained as a meadow because he grew sheep, and then after that it's been used as silage and hay by a number of other farms in the area, including Thatcher Farm that's in Milton. And so it's been maintained one way or another for many, many years as a meadow. Nowadays it's maintained as a meadow because of mowing. So the DCR mows it, I believe, once a year, most of it in the fall. And there's some paths they mow through here more often to keep it low. And but that's what's needed to maintain this. So this is a meadow habitat. The meadow habitats are pretty they're not naturally maintained in this part of Massachusetts. There are a few sort of meadow habitats that are near some of the major waterways in Concord, I know by Connecticut River, that are maintained because of more often inundation by water. But this one, which is mostly upland, although we'll see in a minute a little lower land wet habitat down here, would, if left alone, would succeed into forests. In this area it might be, there's a lot of maples here, so it might be maple, northern hardwood forest, but we're on the south side, so it could be oak. And as I've maybe mentioned, or you might know, southern Massachusetts is kind of the interface between southern hardwoods, oak, hickory, those sorts of trees, and northern hardwoods like maples. So we're kind of at the interface here, depending on where you are. So anyways, it's maintained as a meadow. And there are important species in here because of it being maintained as meadow. Meadows are disturbed habitats. As I said, this is maintained by human management. And so there are natives in here, but as I probably mentioned and you might know, the disturbed habitats also have a lot of other kinds of pioneer species that are often commonly called weeds. So it's a mixture of that in this area. Let me think. So the important reason to maintain this is there are some species, and one of the people's favorite species in this area that like meadow habitats is the eastern bluebird. And eastern bluebirds you you probably know about. They're here all the time. And the DCR has little bluebird boxes that exclude some of the other kinds of birds so that they have a better chance of surviving here, and there are quite a few of them here. There's a lot of other birds here. Birders come out here all the time and see things. The bluebird's kind of really sort of famous. It's got lots of history behind it. There's all sorts of songs about bluebirds. It's really the male bluebird that's all beautiful and blue. The female bluebird tends to be gray and sort of drab. You go back now. And the bluebirds were started dwindling in the Northeast and most of eastern North America, late 1800s, because Europeans introduced a bunch of non-natives, starlings, and what normally called English sparrow, but now called house sparrows. And they really did push out the bluebird extensively. So its populations dropped dramatically. And then after that, bluebirds are very susceptible also to pesticides. They're ground-feeding, insect-feeding birds, and that's where most of the pesticides reside. Though they got hammered by DDT, and they're still harmed a lot where there's a lot of pesticides, like around golf courses and things like that sometimes. Pesticides, what do we need those for? Anyways, they sometimes sit in these trees, and you can they'll be in their normal boxes, and the habitat down here is open, which is what they like for feeding on these insects. So we might walk down here. So the habitat, if we look at this right here, it's very low because it's been mowed repeatedly. So this is part of the stuff that they mow regularly. It's all annuals in here, or mostly annuals in here. Things that can, well, that's not true. There are perennials in here too, but things that can withstand a lot of disturbance, such as mowing. And our favorite, of course, dandelion, which we talked about before. I don't know why everybody hates the dandelion, but I love dandelions. And so do your children. So the dandelions are here, of course. They'll stay on the edge. You won't see them getting in here because they don't compete when there's lots of other vegetation around. There's a lot of other kinds of common plants in here. A lot of different grasses. There's orchard grass, that's not it. Oh, and there's this is very nice, is in flower. This is one of the many plantains, also wind pollinated. So this is not a grass, but you can see the little anthers here, and it tends to be wind pollinated, is wind pollinated, and they're in here. You've seen these in your yard. You find the leaves. There's different kinds here. This one, which is one plantain, has very long, narrow leaves, but the ones you usually see have really round leaves in your garden, and those are also the same genus, different species. So there's a lot of plants like that.
So Rick, what's the difference between like somebody's lawn and I mean, it's just smaller, and
smaller.
a meadow habitat? Are they, you know, if you don't use pesticides and
or herbicides. I mean, this has a much higher diversity of plants than your lawn does. And again, it is a mixture of things. There's buttercups there. Most people don't have those in their lawns. They don't want that. I see this here. This is a very cool plant. This is a galium. This one happens to be not native, but there are a lot of native ones. I think this is also called like meadow madder or something like that. And it has these whorled leaves. It's bedstraw family, and the rest of the members have really sticky stems and then turn into, I guess you can kind of make it as a bed, something like that. This is actually a really cool plant. This is mostly tropical, this whole family, except for a few that get up here, this being one. And it's in the tropical family that you and I love and wouldn't survive without. It's the coffee family. So that's sort of different, and there's not very many of this. Most of the species in that family are down south in the tropics, but there are a few that get up here, and they're usually pretty small compared to like coffee. Anyways, that's a galium. That's non-native, but there are native species here of that. There's a bunch of other things here, like, oh, this is a mustard. It's hard to tell. Mustard's same as this. This is also a mustard family. Mustards all have 4 petals and 6 stamens, which are the male parts here, and they're very, very easy to tell. It's also called the crucifery family, cross. That's what Linnaeus called it. This also has 4 petals. This is a pennywort, meadow pennywort, and it makes those big, fat. A lot of mustards have, well, you can see here, siliques. These are the seeds, or the seed pods, and this one makes those big, round, fat almost the size of a quarter seed pods that are really kind of pretty, although we're a long way from that. They're just tiny little flowers right at the moment, and it's going to slowly sprout up and make more and more seeds on that. So these things you would not find in your lawn. There's your long answer to your short question.
But I imagine they mow it less frequently than
they mow this less frequently. If they mowed it more frequently, some of this certainly wouldn't be here. These would be stressed to be here. And grasses, certainly the plantains and the dandelions seem to be fine when you mow quite regularly, so you see them in your backyard. As we move down this direction, you can see they've mowed less often, and now you're getting the successional stages, and there are more natives in here. This here, it's one of the most important natives in here. It's not beautiful yet, but this is going to be goldenrod, and goldenrods are well, it is goldenrod, but it'll look like goldenrod soon. And goldenrods are many of them in here. There's a number of different species in Massachusetts, and this, I'm not sure which species it is. There's also these things in here. This is a vetch. It's a pea family thing. There's some flowers on some of them, nice purple flowers. I don't see them right here at the moment. There's also some milkweeds here. You can break those open and you see the milky sap coming out. That's a characteristic of everything in that family, pretty much.
Do you want to talk about what's...
Sorry, again?
What depends on milkweed? Why it would be important?
You mean, like, are you asking me about
monarch
butterflies? So she's asking, that's a hint, talk about monarch butterflies. Sure, monarch butterflies, everything. Monarch butterflies, the larvae eat milkweed. They get the latex that's inside that, and it acts as sort of a deterrent poison for birds that might want to eat monarchs. So it's really dripping. Look at that thing. It's pouring down there. Anyway, so that's in here. And as you can see, as we go downhill, there's more and more wetlands. There's actually some open water over here. And in that are some interesting plants. I know that we can't move away from here, so I'm going to run down there and see if I can get any of those things, and I'll bring them back. So everybody wait here. Oh, I wanted to tell you, I don't want anybody to photograph today because I'm going to have kind of a high geek rating because of my socks. My pants are tucked into my socks, and my kids really call that a geek move, but I'm going to go do that. So no photographs, please. I'm doing that because of possible ticks, and we'll come back and talk about that. But let me go down here and see what you see.
And we're not moving because of the internet connection. For some reason it gets worse down by the water. But so if you are interested in exploring the Blue Hills, we would very much encourage you to look at the guide, which talks about different places in the Blue Hills and gives you a different perspective on places that you have been, or maybe suggest or could introduce you to places that you haven't. So you can download the guide at friendsofthebluehills.org/guide, and it should also be in the comments. And and Rick is still coming.
Coming back up, I found a really great discovery. We were talking about bluebirds under that tree. I was looking under that tree and I found, look at that.
Oh my gosh. No, really?
That is, no, really. Look at the size of that. That would be a very big bluebird. No. Okay, that really didn't come from a bluebird. That was my chicken nutmeg, one of the Spice Girls we have. Okay, so here I went down to that wetland, and first of all, there's some things you can see. Like there's a tree right here. That's a red maple, which is kind of nice. That's native, and it likes wet. It likes having its feet in the water. You can also look over here, and those trees there, those are maples also, but that's Norway, which is an invasive tree, and it's in a very disturbed habitat. They get very big. And if you look even further across over there, you see these big majestic trees. That's along the road. Those are sugar maples. And so those are also native. So the sugar maples, the Norway invader, and then red maple right here sitting in the water. So you get a good distribution of the different maple species here. So down in that water I went and I found all sorts of things besides that egg. This is a leaf. You can't probably see it this far, and we can't go down there because the video's not working very well. But this is skunk cabbage, and it makes a it's related to calla lilies and jack-in-the-pulpits, other things like that, and it makes a very stinky smelling flower, which is why it's called skunk cabbage. And the flowers were not there. I looked. They're the first things up in the spring, so they're already gone. And it's just a little cup-shaped thing with a bulb and a flower. All the flowers are on that bulb. Also down there, which you can see, all the sort of light green fern. This is a sensitive fern, and this is the vegetative fronds or leaves coming from the ground, and then these are what they call the fertile leaves or fronds, and these are the ones these are from last season, but these are the ones that have all the spores so that it can reproduce. So it produces both of these things, and down there you can see both of those things there. These are last year's fronds for producing the spores that were then spread everywhere and produce new little ferns. It's called sensitive fern because I think it's one of the first things to go with the frost in the late of the part of the season. I believe that's why it's called sensitive fern. But that's native. All of these things are native. The skunk cabbage, the sensitive fern, and I don't know if you can tell, but you can see these tufts of plants. I'm going to run down and grab one for you, just to look.
So one of the reasons why we're talking about meadow habitat is because it's up
here.
There isn't that much of it.
Those are all, some of them are bunch grasses, but most of them are sedges and rushes. And they're similar to grasses. They tend to be the sedges and rushes very much in the wetlands. Up here it's mostly the grasses, down there the sedges and the rushes. And they have the similar look to them. The sedges and grasses tend to have, the sedges and rushes tend to have sort of unusual, thicker stems, sometimes triangular shaped, and they have different fruiting bodies. They make flowers just like grasses do, but they're a slightly different look to them. I could probably bring some up here, but anyways, those are native, and you can see they're bunches. They are perennials, so they last, they resprout from the same spot year after year. So that's also characteristic of sort of later kinds of successional things, less mowed, less disturbed. That would still get completely, you see the trees walking in here, if nobody mowed anything and nobody disturbed anything, that would probably get covered with trees pretty quickly. So it would not stay this way. Let's see, what else should I talk about? Rest for a second. Well, I mentioned that the whole habitat has got, I've been pointing out the natives, but you can see it's very shrubby over here, and there are both native and non-native things in here. One of the non-natives is this stuff. So this is bittersweet celastrus. It's the one that makes beautiful colored orange and red fruits that people hang on their doors towards October and that sort of thing, but it really is a nasty invasive. It's starting to produce, it's got little flower buds here everywhere, but it is a nasty invasive, and you can see it's crawling over everything. And in fact, it does, I've seen it out here, it manages to get even out here into the grassland. It's not going to survive out here, but it's going to, I've seen little plants sort of popping up out here as well. So this is a nasty invasive, and again, it's a pioneer species, just like the native individuals in here, but it's a little more aggressive. I did mention that it's, here's another thing. Flowers aren't necessarily spectacular, but this is the genus is Veronica, and it's in the snapdragon family. I think it's speedwells are the common name, and this one is, I think, not native. I'm not sure, but it is common in this sort of disturbed habitat area too. So it's in flower, although very tiny. The other things that are in here, of course, and the reason I rolled up my pants is the dangers of this place. There's a lot of poison ivy in here, and there's also ticks. I don't know, I have poison ivy on my knee right now, and if you really wanted to show that, I could show it up, but it might not go well on, I think their children could be watching this. It might not be safe. So anyways, but there's a lot of poison ivy in here, and poison ivy is, even though it's native, it is. I also think of it as invasive, partly because it's been well documented now that poison ivy seems to love global warming. It grows. It's been estimated that it grows about 50% faster now than it did 50 years ago. And top that off, apparently the toxins are getting stronger. And so we're in for it. Anyways, that's in here, and it loves this disturbed habitat, and it's the DCR doesn't mow quite enough to keep it to zero, so it pops in here pretty regularly. So it's out through here, and of course the ticks are in here. Deer ticks. Basically, their eggs are in the spring. They hatch. They have little larvae, which are tiny, tiny, tiny little ticks. They feed on a mouse somewhere, and then they turn to nymphs, which are bigger looking ticks. And at this time of year, starting May, those little guys can start biting us. They tend to go through a whole year, and then the second year, which they're also coming out about now, the second year's ticks that have into full-grown adult ticks, they're also beginning to bite now, and they will, the females will bite us, get a good meal, or any other deers or any other large mammals, get a good meal, and then lay more eggs for the following spring. And that's those two times when it's even 1 year, but also the second year it can convey or pass on various diseases like Lyme's disease. So that's why I've got the geek look today, but just no photographs. Okay. So what else should I talk about, Judy?
I think you've covered quite a lot just from sitting here in this one place.
One more thing I could say.
We're going to say one more thing.
Okay. I see, interestingly, if you look down here, I want to point that out. These are maples, and if you look around here, there's many of them here. This isn't as thick as some areas. I was around the corner over here, and there were maples, thousands of maples on the ground. And it just makes me think, or it makes you understand how strong, how natural selection works. You look at the density of adult maples. There's 1, 2, 3, if you're counting the different species in the area, yet there's probably 10,000 little maple seedlings down here. The only ones that are going to make it to adults are ones that have all the right genes, all the right characteristics. So you can really see how strong natural selection can be on something like a wild plant like maples. There's also a bunch of other little, I did notice this too. This is a rumix. It's a sorrel. You can chew that stuff. I was eating garlic mustard last week. It's a sour flavor. It's in the same family as buckwheat. And you can actually eat the seeds on all the different kinds of rumex too, and maybe grind it into flour if you were desperate. So that's out here too. That's also, this is non-native, but it's, in this, and there are native ones too. Okay, I think I've probably done as much as you want me to do.
Good, thanks, Rick.
What else would you...
And the reason we wanted to kind of talk about meadow habitat was because it needs to be managed.
Yeah, and there are bluebirds with huge eggs here.
It disappears and has chicken eggs. No, it doesn't have chicken eggs, but it does, species rely on it for their survival, and there's often development on meadow habitat, particularly their threats within the Blue Hills. There's open land that people see as open, and like in the Indian Line Farm, which was another place that we might go at a different time. That has meadow habitat like the one at Brookwood Farm. So, so thanks, Rick, and thank you for watching Blue Hills Alive, your weekly guide to the Blue Hills. It's sponsored by Tom O'Neill of Success Real Estate in Milton. And if you want to learn more about the Blue Hills, particularly places that you might not have explored, you could download our guide at friendsofthebluehills.org/guide, and we'll see you next week when we'll talk about the insect-eating plants at Pongapog.
Sounds fun.